What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Socially Distanced Sports Talk, presented by WCBN Sports. My name is Amer Bektas. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest who has been to almost every major sporting event you can think of, ranging from Super Bowls, NCAA Final Fours, NBA Finals, all the way up to covering 10 Olympic Games in his career. For the past 3 decades, he has been broadcasting sports news to the West Michigan area, starting with high school sports, all the way up to the pros. Just recently last year, he was inducted into the Grand Rapids Sports Hall of Fame with TV8 Sports Director Jack Doles. Jack, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Amer. Good to join you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on to the show. So to start off the show, I just wanted to go through your career path and just talk about what led you to your position today. So at what time would you say that you decided, I want this to be my career?
I went to Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa, and I was a freshman, and I got into the TV news program, and then joined the broadcast news station that they were putting out a campus news program once a week. So once I kind of saw what was going into that, I thought that might be my path. At that point, I still thought I might be a magazine writer or a newspaper writer, or maybe even write some novels or something like that, because I love to write. But my junior year in college, I got an internship at WHO TV. And that, as soon as I started that internship and started working with some guys that were in the field and saw what they were doing and saw the process of putting together stories and shows, I was hooked. And that's when I made the decision that I was going to get into this business one way or another. At first, I thought it was going to be as a sports photographer, but I wanted to try on air just to see if I could do it, just so that I knew years down the line, if it didn't work for me, if I was still a sports photographer, that's what I wanted to be, and I didn't have any questions. But this is a job that I've just enjoyed fully ever since I got in, and a career path that if you want to chase it, I'd advise you to pursue your dreams. It's been fun. It's taken me places I never, ever dreamed of going.
That's awesome. So what would you say is the most important attribute somebody can have who is chasing at the opportunity to get into the field of sports journalism?
Well, get into it not because you want to be on television or you want to hear your voice on radio. Get into it because you've got a passion for it, for telling stories. If a young journalist will come to me and say, what can I do to help myself in this career path, I would tell them, read and write. Read everything you can get your hands on. Find really good sports writers. If sports is where you want to get into, and read everything you can just to see how they tell a story. For me, I just love telling stories, and that's a big reason I got into this. Just the chance to get somebody to share something with you that they maybe were a little reluctant to do so, to gain that trust, and then to tell a story that will impact somebody else's life, not only theirs, but somebody else's. I love to deliver that message of hope, or that message of, look what this person's overcome, and this is how they did it. It's just, that's what I enjoy the most. Doing a sportscast on a regular basis, that's what I get paid for. But my passion is to go and find a story that I haven't seen somebody else tell yet, and tell it in a way that will impact somebody else. I don't know who, but somebody.
That's great. Yeah. Like I said, I grew up in Grand Rapids, so I've watched you on TV do your thing, and it really is inspirational, some of the stories that you bring up, and it's just great to see on TV. So did you have like a mentor or anybody you looked up to during your young career of trying to get into the sports business?
Yeah, so like the first WHO, there were 3 sports guys in that department, and I worked very closely with all 3. And all 3 had completely different styles. And that's when you learn, be yourself. I can't be, the 3 guys were Jeff Bionfor, Bruce Kellner, and Tony Powers. I haven't worked with those guys in 34 years, but I'll still keep in touch with those guys. I still hear from them, still reach out to them when I've got some questions sometimes. And they were just really good at pushing me in ways that I hadn't been pushed before. So if, and at that point I was working with them, working for them. And if my work wasn't good enough, it impacted their work. So I was pushed and prodded to get better as fast as I could and to learn. And I was also, I'll share one little story with you. When I was about 3 months into the internship, and I think 2 weeks in a row, I had an opportunity to go out on a date, or in this one case, it was to go to Chicago for the Michael Jackson Victory Tour concert with this girl that had asked. And I was like, hey, Bruce, can I go to Chicago this weekend? He goes, all right, this is 2 straight weeks. You've asked to get off. If you ask a third, it'll be the last time you ask me. I can get 20 guys from Drake that want to do what you're doing now. So go ahead, have fun, but when you come back, be ready to work. And that was a really valuable kick in the butt and a valuable lesson that I've learned from. You're accountable to, life's about you, right? But when you're putting yourself in those kind of situations, then suddenly you're accountable to other people. And you got to be there for them. You can't just wander off to every party or everything that you want to go to. There's some responsibilities that you're going to have to live up to. And he said it in a great way, and I learned that lesson from Bruce. From Jeff, I learned energy. His energy that he had in shows was off the charts. And, you can't just be real monotone on air. What you get from me in a normal conversation is not quite going to be what you're going to get when I'm on air, but I still have to be myself when I'm on air. But there's an energy level you've got to give to the viewers to keep them engaged and keep them interested. Yeah. From Tony Powers, I just learned how to handle people out in the field. Everybody wanted to come up and talk to Tony. He did some shtick and some different things that were creative that I wouldn't do, but I learned that you can't be afraid to step outside of the box. So all three of them gave me a little something that I learned from. And then also a professor that I had at Drake, John Lytle, was a great influence in my career as well.
Those sound like some really great mentors you've had who've really shown you the ropes of this industry. So moving on to the next question, what does a typical day look like for you in the office?
Well, it's been a little different since the pandemic started, right? I have all my career worked nights where I come into the station about 1:30 or 2 and I'm here until midnight. Lately, it's been come in at about 9, 10 o'clock and I'm here through until about 7. It's just changed the way we had to learn to do Zoom interviews like this one. But a typical day is when we get through this pandemic, I'll be in the office from about 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon until midnight. And at midnight, if I've got some special projects that I'm working on, right now in the hopper, we've got a 2-hour show that we're doing for the Olympics. We're owned by Nexstar, and I was going to be one of 7 reporters that was leaving next Thursday to go to Tokyo to cover the Olympic Games in Tokyo. Well, those obviously got canceled, and our assignment's been pushed back a year, but we're still producing a 2-hour show called Journey to Japan, Dreams on Hold. So we're reaching out to athletes who've had their dreams put on hold. How are they getting through the pandemic? How are they continuing to train? What has this done to their lives? I also had a chance to talk to Tommy Smith, the 1968. You saw him raise his fist above his head on the Olympic podium after he won the gold medal in protest of the way Black people were treated, racial injustice. So that was a fascinating conversation in this time, because it's the same conversation to some point that we were having in 1968. And so to talk to this guy who is this encyclopedia, it was like I was in a history book for a few minutes, and to get his perspective was fascinating. So anyway, that's a show we're working on. We were going to be doing that show in 2 weeks. Now we're going to be doing it in 2 months. So that'll be something that when I'm finished with my responsibilities for Wood TV, I'll take some time and start working on that as well. So there's a lot of different projects going on, and right now we still have to prepare for high school football as if it's going to happen, prepare if games will happen at the big house, but who knows, in another week or a month, we could be taking the same path that they're taking right now in the Ivy League, where just have to put it on hold. And if that happens, I'm telling you, Amer, if that happens, what we saw at Stanford yesterday is what's going to happen at a lot of universities across the country. If there's no football for schools like Alabama, that's not going to bode well for the rest of their athletic departments.
Been talking about it now with the coronavirus and how it's really just changed everything for everybody's life right now. What are some things that you see in the future how coronavirus is going to impact like how you broadcast sports, and how when you go to like a sporting event, when you go through the security checkpoints and all that, like what are some things that you think will change from how they were pre-coronavirus?
Well, first off, will we have fans at anything? Until we get a hold of coronavirus, until people start wearing their masks on a regular basis, until we've got some kind of a vaccine, I don't know how you can safely put, even 20,000 people in the big house. The days of 100,000, those could be a long ways away. Right now with contact sports, we've seen UFC continue. We've seen sports like that go. Boxing's back. Baseball's trying to come back. Football hopes to be back. But how can you safely put these athletes out there to compete against each other, when they're breathing on each other and they're, spitting on each other and their sweat is flying? Those are big questions that will be answered here in the coming months. We'd hope we'd be past this by now, but we're not. So the way it changed for us for doing sportscast were more of those Zoom interviews, more of topicals, because we don't have the day-to-day highlights. And I don't know when that's coming back. Right now I'm planning on day-to-day highlights with baseball at the end of July. Well, we'll see. I mean, how many teams have had to just stop workouts or take days off because their testing numbers weren't complete yet? The tests that they're doing to make sure these athletes are safe. Well, will we be able to do that in football with every single athlete pretty much every day that they've got to go compete against each other in practice, in games? There's so much that has to happen before we're out there and our old normal is back. This new normal is changing every day.
So as you mentioned with the Ivy League coming out with the news yesterday that they're canceling basically all fall sports through January 1st, leaving the question up in the air, will we see a spring season? How do you think the Ivy League's decision yesterday impacts the Power Five and their decision on whether they want to have fall sports, whether it just be football, because the football revenue for a school is more than 50% of the budget?
Well, I will tell you this, and just had this conversation with Peter Stursma, the football coach at Hope today. I don't think the Ivy League's decision will in any way impact the Power Five, because the Ivy League doesn't have that kind of a TV deal and all of that. They don't have that revenue streaming in because of football, because of basketball. So the Power Five is going to hold out as long as they can. Because there's so much revenue. What does the Big Ten Network pay out to all these Big Ten schools? About $40 million a year, 25 to 40 million, somewhere in there. If there's no football and if there's no basketball, well, there's no revenue coming in for the Big Ten Network, and there's no revenue coming out to the Big Ten schools. So the Big Ten school isn't going to go, well, the Ivy League has decided to put it on hold, so we should too. That'll never happen. So they're gonna hold out, and they're gonna go through what they have to go through. And then I think, what did Ohio State shut down their workouts for 2 weeks? If that kind of thing becomes the norm, if teams can't hold camps safely, how can they play games safely? If students aren't allowed on campuses once the school year starts, like we saw Harvard already say, students won't be coming on campus. If that happens on Michigan State, how can you then ask the football players and the other sports, these contact sports especially, to come to campus and go play? That'll be a difficult decision that these presidents and the Big Ten commissioner will have to make. And I think a lot of that will be based around if they can actually get students on campus. If we're going to have in-person classes, then I think they'll have some comfort that they can go ahead and play these games. But if they don't, that'll be a big ask of student athletes to come and play and risk.
The situation is changing every day. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but do you think that we're looking at more of having a conference schedule in the fall or a chances of moving it to a spring schedule? And hopefully by then we can have like a vaccine, therapeutics, and we can introduce fans back into the big house.
Yeah, I think it's more likely that we go to a conference schedule. I know Jim Harbaugh was asked yesterday, do you want to start the season at Washington like you're supposed to? And he said that's a decision for the athletic director. Jim Harbaugh will play anybody that you put in front of him. But I think for the safety of the kids right now, I'm not sure if flights are a great idea, but there's still going to be some flights in the Big Ten. The logistics of moving the sports to the spring are way more difficult than I think anybody realizes. It sounds like a quick, easy fix. Yeah, just move it to the spring, no big deal. But there's logistics involved that'll make that very difficult, especially at the high school level. It's a lot to have happen, and if it's going to happen, it's got to happen sooner than later. But yeah, there's so many big hurdles that have got to be cleared before this season can be played. But I think at this point, yeah, the safest thing would be Michigan and Michigan State start putting Western and Central as their non-conference foes, or Eastern Michigan. Play these in-state schools or something in a MAC that's very close, that's a bus ride, as opposed to an airplane. Now, a lot of these schools aren't, like Michigan's never flying commercial. They're going to be on a charter plane. But schools in the Ivy League, they're not on charter planes. Those kids are flying commercial. So I think that's part of the reason the Ivy Leagues just said, we're just putting the student athletes' health first. We'll not worry about football yet.
With that, the only thing we can do right now is put a mask on, take care of yourself, and listen to the experts.
Yeah.
So, transitioning back to kind of Grand Rapids sports, during your time with Wood TV, you've seen the minor league sports just explode here in Grand Rapids with the Griffins and the Whitecaps. What's your outlook on sports here in Grand Rapids? Could we potentially see an MLS team join with what GRFC did a couple of years ago? Kind of what's the outlook for Grand Rapids sports?
Well, I know a dream scenario would be an MLS team. But before that happens, they've got to have a stadium here that would seat, about 25, 30,000? Who's going to build that? That'd be the big question. We're in a great place right now for the American Hockey League with the Griffins, the Midwest League with the Whitecaps. Although I wouldn't be surprised if we see some changes in the Midwest League. And I wouldn't be surprised, I'm not going to predict this, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Whitecaps were next year the Tigers Midwest League or AA affiliate, because they're going to move out of Erie. You're going to see a lot of minor league franchises taken away because they're eliminating about 42 minor league teams in all. So that'll create some shuffling. The Midwest League has some really premier franchises with Dayton and Grand Rapids in West Michigan, Kane County. Those are teams that are drawing between 5,000 and 10,000 fans a game. So that makes this league something, and they really good facilities, really good ballparks. That makes this league intriguing for higher level prospects. The Whitecaps have always been reluctant to move up to AAA or even AA because travel costs would be so great. But if you made the Midwest League a AA league, now all of a sudden, Erie is going to go away for the Tigers. Well, Grand Rapids becomes a really good plan for AA if that league moves over here. So just planting the seed there. But right now, it's a great market for the Whitecaps, for the Griffins, for the Drive, and that contract with the Pistons runs out soon. So there's some questions there. Will they become Denver's affiliate? Will they go on their own? If they go on their own, that's a huge expense. where you've got to pay for all of these contracts of these players. Right now, the drive takes care of travel and little things like that, game day operations. Well, those costs grow exponentially if all of a sudden they have to go at it by themselves without an affiliation. What I would have loved to see is this becomes the place where the G League high school kids go. The guys that are passing on freshman year in college, who are really high-level prospects, who are going to be paid well by the league. This would be a great spot for that, because I think then we'd see great crowds. Love to see a new arena, but again, Van Andel's too big for that league, and I'm not sure anybody's going to invest in a 5,000-seat stadium in downtown Grand Rapids. MLS, long answer to your question. MLS, I think if you see a stadium being built, then I would get excited about seeing the MLS here. But, Detroit hasn't been able to land an MLS franchise yet, in part because their plan is to play them at Ford Field. That's too big of a venue. It becomes dead in there. You want a place like they've got in Columbus, or they've got in some of these other cities, that's about a 15 to 25, 30,000 seat stadium. You've just got to be able to create enough use for it to build it in a place like this.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Grand Rapids sports, but it's definitely a great market, as you mentioned. And then throughout your time with Wood TV8, what are some memories or stories that you've done that really stick out to you during your career?
Well, the opportunity I've had to cover all these Olympics has been fantastic. And those games, to me, there's nothing like an Olympic Games. And I love to sit down and talk to some of these athletes and create these relationships with them. For this coming games, Donovan Brazier went to Kennewa Hills High School, went for a year at Texas A&M. He set the U.S. He was the world champion in the 800 meters this year. So he was going to head into this a favorite to win a gold medal. And he was peaking at just the right time. Donovan's just a great young man. I've had a chance to sit down with him a couple of times. He's just pushes himself. Dathan Ritzenhein, a guy who played on 4 Olympics, competed in 3 Olympics, was trying to make a 4th team. That didn't quite happen. But what he's done in the running world, helped put the U.S. back on the map. There's some stories I've told that helped me, just learn a little bit more about people and create empathy and learn about empathy. But one of my favorite stories was Richard Nagelkirk was a student manager at Holland Christian High School. And Richard, he's a special needs student. His coach, Mickey Phelps, a legend in West Michigan, wanted to say thank you for 3 or 4 years of hard work where he showed up every day, eager to work, eager to serve. And he told him, you're going to wear sweats that day, but you're going to have a uniform on underneath. And if we're up or down by 15 points, and they were playing Detroit Country Day, we are going to let you get in there and play. So true to his word, they were down like 15 points with about a minute and a half left. He called Richard off the bench, and he put him in. Well, Richard got the ball in his hands and tried to get a shot off, didn't work. But at the very end, comes down at the buzzer. He nails a 3-point shot, hits it, and the crowd is going nuts. People are storming the floor, and they lost by like 15 points. But Richard had this special moment. And we've seen this story played out a couple of times since then, and it got all these ESPN headlines. Richard was the first one that I saw that they allowed to do this. And when we told that story, I was just blown away by the impact. And this was before social media. I've been around a while. This is before social media. I promise you, if we had social media back then, this would have gone viral. And you'd have seen more and more coaches doing the kind of thing that Mike Phelps did. And so it was great to see a servant, somebody that just served with his heart, get a reward like this. Little reward, but it was amazing to see. And to this day, this was in 2000, Richard still helps out with the Holland Christian Athletic Department. still serves those kids, still calls us on a regular basis with scores, or just wants to come in on Friday nights for football to just kind of take in a show and be here in his element. A guy who just loves sports. And what sports can do for people is just amazing. We had another guy that I did a Road Warrior project with the Riverbank Run, where they get a group of people prepared. They coach them. They become a team, and they go out and they run the Riverbank Run, the 25K, the whole thing. Well, I did it one year so that I could meet some of these road warriors and get to know their stories. Well, one of the guys, Walter Catton. Walter was a fitness buff, and he was on his bike training for one of those Ironman things, and he got hit by an SUV and, survived, but for 6 months he couldn't walk. His body was just broken into pieces, and he was a road warrior. So my goal was to try and get him across the finish line and tell a really good story, inspiring story. So created a great friendship with him, put together this piece that, is very moving, just his tale and how it changed his life, and how he actually wouldn't change where he was then to where he was before that, because it changed his life in a good way with his family and his wife, and, personally, and his relationship with God. And so on race day, we had trained for months, and it was really looking forward to this last chance, and then watching him cross the finish line. We got about a mile from the finish line, and he had to kind of lay me down. I dehydrated, and he got me help, and I was like, go finish. So I got carted away to the ambulance. Walter finished the race. And, Walter's he's done amazing things since then. You ever heard of Coppercraft?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he created that brand, he and his wife. So just an incredible guy. And I just love to meet people and create these friendships and tell their stories. But there's two. I could go on with more and more and more, but I don't want to keep you here all day.
I think that's great. And those are the type of stories that we see with sports, and kind of just those comeback stories, the underdogs. And that's probably the biggest life lessons that I've learned in high school, because I went to Caledonia High School and I played soccer, and I got cut my junior year and came back my senior year and scored one of the game-winning goals and helped our team in the playoffs towards the end of the season. So it's just those type of stories that we see in high school sports that hopefully we get to experience this fall, because that's something that you can't really learn in the classroom. Right. And sports is probably the biggest impact on me.
And getting cut was devastating, right?
Yeah.
But you persevered. Mm-hmm. So, and then you're back with the guys, and you're part of that team again. And I promise you, if you told that story to an employer, it's a notch in your belt in the right direction, because they see that, okay, I didn't get this job. Well, he's going to continue to push. So I would share that story in a job interview sometime.
It's something that has really shaped me and my outlook on life, because it's not, you have to learn how to fail. That's what I learned this year at U of M with one of the classes with Professor Walt Boardman. He just told us that if you're not willing to fail, you're not willing to try something new. And that's probably one of the best advice that I've learned so far, is you have to be willing to fail if you're going to try something new. Otherwise, you're not going to do anything. You're just going to stay steady.
Yeah. So that goes along with thinking and going outside the box. Push yourself, try new things. If you go do the same thing every day, you're going to be bored. It's just like a workout. If you go home and do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups every single day, that's a grind. Come up with something new I shouldn't be putting those kind of analogies together because I'm a sloth, but just do things that'll push your mind, push your creativity to another level, because I promise you, if it works out, you're going to be so much more satisfied and excited, and then ready to try it again and try something new, another way of telling a story, another way of, turning a phrase. That's why it's great to read good writers, because you see a different way of doing things. And they've just got ways of telling stories that kind of hook you in and keep you there to the finish, instead of reading the first paragraph and moving on.
Yeah. And with that, as we head into our closing remarks of this episode, is there any one piece of advice you would have for somebody that's trying to pursue a career in sports journalism, but also people that are graduating into this uncertainty with COVID-19?
Well, the first thing I would say is, if you're a freshman or a sophomore in college, go get as many internships as you can. If you're going to get into television, don't graduate and have no internship experience under your belt. You want to chase that, because you're going to learn more in those stations. Sorry, professors, but I know it was this way with me. As great as my professors were, I learned more when I was at WHO TV than I did in the classroom setting, because it was all hands-on. I worked with people that thought different ways, had different ideas. So yeah, push yourself to get internships. Push yourself to do more. A little less party and a little more work, and you're going to help yourself out a lot. With the COVID thing, I've got 2 kids right now. One just graduated from TCU, and a son that had graduated from Northwestern the year before, with his master's. And both are hitting the job markets right now. So patience. I would still pursue what you want to do. So my daughter right now is trying to get a job with a couple of different NFL franchises. And at this point, both are on hiring freezes. She's got an interview with the NFLPA tomorrow. So she would like to work in that, but we've also told her that league will be around forever. So if they've got hiring freezes, don't just sit here and wait not to be hired. Get some other experience in some way. So yeah, don't be too down by the times, because I'm sure it's difficult to land work at this point. But you got to continue to chase it. If you sit at home and do nothing, employers are not going to come knocking on your door. Make some contacts, get to know some people, see who they know, who can help you land that job, and create those relationships, because it's typically going to be somebody you knew that helped you get your foot in the door. So create those relationships.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think with that, we have reached the end of our episode. Jack, thank you so much for coming on to the show today and really showing us your wisdom and inspiring not only me, but hopefully our listeners as well. And hopefully we get to meet up sometime in the future.
Stop in anytime, Amer. Appreciate your time. And thanks for watching while you're in Grand Rapids.
For Jack Doles, I'm Amer Bektas, and you've been listening to WCBN's presentation of Socially Distanced Sports Talk. Have a great day, and as always, go blue.